So this is that challenge. It's an ordinary dystopia. Set a short story in a dystopian world. Things can be overtly wrong or just subtly off. Make us feel that tension in the scenes and characters. I recommend channeling Kurt Vonnegut for inspiration on exploring these environments. By Beatrice Gomes, one of my favorite newcomers to prose. And I was reading these this morning. I fell in love with this challenge. I wish I'd have thought of it. This would have been an excellent challenge for prose. But that just goes to show you how great our writer base is. But here we go. This is by AJJ, and it's called Don't Knock. Don't knock, please don't knock. I pray almost silently as I hear the noises outside. The sounds could be distant voices, or maybe just animals or the wind. I'm deluding myself, I know that, but it's better than the other option, which is that they are here for me. My heart clenches in my chest as the ugliest thoughts enter my head. I hope that it's one of my neighbors. No, I can't hope that. I can't wish that on anyone. I stay frozen in place, even as every muscle instinctively strains to run. Running only makes it worse. I know that, but only my brain believes. The sounds are unmistakable now, heavy, rhythmic footsteps not far outside my door. I pray again, now clenching my hands together. This time, without shame, I ask favors of a God I barely believe in and possibly despise. Please be here for her, I beg, thinking of my neighbor to the left, a bitter old woman without a redeeming feature. Everyone else I'm fond of, especially Lena across the way. The footsteps pause, and I hear voices clearly now, and then the dreaded knock. My whole body seizes at how close the sound is. But I realize my door didn't rattle. It's not me. I sink to the floor as my attention eases. Thanking the heavens, I cry in relief at the close call. Then I hear the unmistakable wails of children and Lena telling them to be good for their father, while her voice cracks in despair. The footsteps retreat, but the cries do not, and I stumble to my bed and cover my face as I crazily cry. I am disgusted with myself. I'm so happy to be safe, it overwhelms my sadness over my friend, and I hate myself for it. Especially since I know I'm the one they really wanted. Nice. Yeah, that's good. Mariah, this is so nerve-wracking. I loved it. Yeah, me too. It's good. It's really good. Becca Waits. Minimalism. And it's no secret this is another one of my favorites on prose. I have like 1,000 favorites, but whenever I see Becca Waits, I devour it, so. Minimalism. But the gloves don't do anything, McIntyre wailed. In fact, they make my hands all itchy and red. I know, sweetie, but the supreme order of all that is good and righteous has decreed this as law, and we can't break the law, Mac. I know, Mac replied sullenly, or I get sent to the stupid reframe my brain camp. Mac, exclaimed her mother, it's called Reformation for the Progress of the Mind. And it's not a camp, it's an enlightenment education center. Please, dear daughter, stop fretting. You're going to raise your temperature up past the mandatory allowed temperature level, and I don't have time for this today. Inspection is coming this Friday, and I must be sure our home is prepared. Do your breathing exercises. No more arguing, your cheeks are already flushed. I'm a bit surprised that Health Drone hasn't checked in on this. The grid must be very busy this morning. 15-year-old McIntyre groaned audibly, but slunk off in the direction of the sleep room, and Sephora sighed with relief. Mac had been so grouchy lately, and Sephora knew that her daughter was just adapting to the new round of mandatory well-being meds, but it seemed more like good mood reducer meds. She knew better than to let that thought cultivate. The thoughtful guidance committee was as tech-savvy as they were dedicated to the regrowth of goodness and humanity, and were quick to nip in the bud any seeds of discourse they might detect in her mind that might take root and disrupt the program. With a sigh, Sephora blanketed her mind with cheerful affirmations. We are willing and proud to be the stewards of a better and beautiful earth. And she put on her happy face and set about prepping the daily nourishment course of Revita Green, which were really just crushed grasshoppers, but she tried not to remember that, because it still made her squeamish, although it had been at least 25 years since she'd seen anything even resembling a bog hop that wasn't a robosect. Jeffrey was due to the living quarters any minute now, and she quickly entered in the data for daily check-in on his iDuty pod to the Understanding a Better Way lesson station, along with his place setting at the table. She had to keep him focused on the goal, or he might have a not okay thought, and that would mean they would send in Sheila to reformat him. And last time the ambassador for pure living had been sent to intervene, Sephora had spent the next 22 awake days in constant meditation for refocus of proper mood patterns before she was free of all negative thought towards the Sheila Robo Maiden, the mandatory male tendency stress relief bot, sent in to craftily and subtly charm any stray thinkers back into their metaphorical sheeple pens by any means deemed necessary. Her daughter reemerged then, face tranquil and placid, and Jeffrey arrived then as well, wearing his new Twinkle Charm Vision tech he downloaded onto his Vision program that morning. He was alone. Sephora breathed and ran a quick gratitude thought through her mind and thanked the benevolent caregivers for her good fortune. Nice. 7v7. Let's hope mankind escapes such mental slipslide. With that caveat, enjoy this thoroughly. Awesome. Mariah always has a good thing to say. Huckleberry who? Ooh, but those liberals are selling a bill of goods. Okay. Speaking of Mariah, this is Mariah with Dystopian Eden. The couple enjoyed tending their small, productive backyard garden. Their dog followed them closely as they worked. He was, as often as not, underfoot. He bounded, ears flopping adorably, content with his place in this tiny but strong pack. When it was their scheduled day for power grid access, they were mandated to watch their quadrant's assigned news channel for their scheduled programming. It was a seemingly mindless mesh of sports scores, celebrity gossip, fashion trends, beauty advice, and pop music lyrics. Bubblegum for the brain, delivered in a loop of glitchy 2-minute video segments. The couple saw it for what it was, and they boldly refused. They decided they would not be partaking in the subliminal garbage du jour being served. There would be consequences when viewing compliance reports were run. The couple was unsure how often this was done, but assumed it would be soon. Shortly after the Sequestration for the Common Good Act had passed, the couple noticed that every form of media that promoted individual thought of the questioning of authority was gradually being eradicated from the public's reach. Ironically, there had been a novel written long ago that warned of this very thing taking place. Now that book was gone too. In retaliation, the couple created a brazened co-op along with a handful of like-minded neighbors. An illegal take one, leave one of unapproved DVDs, VHS tapes, cassette tapes, and banned books. The items were well hidden, moved often, and never spoken of. It was a huge, albeit quiet, success. Books were the couple's favorite, as the two had always shared a deep love of the written word. They were happy, all things considered. However, they knew that harsh punishment was imminent for their heinous infractions. The awareness did not frighten them or dissuade them in any way, just the opposite, in fact. They flourished with life. The known fragility of their bliss only sweetened their fleeting time left together. Colors were brighter, food tasted more delicious than seemed reasonable, and sex was out of this world satisfying. With banishment and certain death looming, the pleasures of life now seemed to be amplified. This was the rhythm of life now, tending the garden, playing with their sweet pup, reading together, sharing wonderful meals, and ravishing one another's bodies with fervor. It was heartbreakingly simple and pure what they shared. This was their Eden, for as long as it lasted. Beautiful. Thanks for the channel. Oh. Huckleberry who? The text here is also heartbreakingly simple. Wish I had the knack for it. Nicely done. Yeah. Hands of fire. I love the sentence, bubblegum for the brain, delivered a loop of glitchy 2-minute video segments. Nice ride, yeah. I too love that sentence. Sad hill. Large, smart, yeah. This is good. BJ Lecrae, too bad feeling good being bad. Doing good is bad. Nice. Yeah, well done. This is turn back time. I'm reading these cold, by the way, so sorry if there's any awkward pauses or breaths. Any little edits you see glibbed in is just me dropping a line. And I just go, if I'm dropping a line, I just go back and I just replace it. So, okay, this is Abby with turn back time. She paces the linoleum floor, cautiously avoiding every crack. The silence of the hall, filled to the brim with people, is deafening. The click-click of the woman's shoes, the only audible sound. She hears a scream, somewhere seemingly distant, but in reality far too close. She stops pacing and sits, head in her hands. The visceral screaming doesn't stop. When at least the wretched sound subsides, the woman looks up, relief in her eyes. That is, until she sees that every set of eyes in the room is on her, staring intently. The woman looks around anxiously, as if trying to fathom why she is being watched. The screaming begins again, louder and more intense than the first. This time, when the woman holds her head still standing, a figure dressed in only white runs to her and whisks her away, the screaming continuing the whole way down the hall. The door shuts behind the figure, and the screaming becomes muffled, almost strangled, until it abruptly stops. The hall is silent for several moments, the people lining the halls managing to do little more than glance from one face to another, none brave enough to question the scene that had played out. When the door finally opens again, a young girl walks out, and very quickly heads for the exit door, skipping and smiling all the way. Nice. Okay, D-Test John. Magnus Deus. The Magnus Deus is the greatest mind to ever walk the earth. It began as a vague idea discussed by a group of college friends over drinks after an artificial intelligence, AI, seminar held by Google. These friends hail from various fields: data science, engineering, robotics, philosophy, literature, history, political science, psychology, economics, medicine, law. Intrigued by AI, disgusted with the state of the world, moderately intoxicated, they discussed using existing AI technology to develop the singular, most advanced mind ever imagined. Their creation would minimize the impact of humanity on decision-making to eliminate the subjectivity that interferes with making decisions with the greatest long-term positive effects at both the micro, individual, and macro, global levels. Magnus Deus would touch every face of society. They argued about what bulwarks they would put into place to ensure that despite its ultimate superiority to humanity, humanity would still retain the power to intervene. They never came to an agreement. It was the wee hours of the morning before they left the bar. The next day they went home to their heretofore ordinary lives. Within 5 years, the friends had pooled their resources to buy a warehouse in a remote location and dedicate themselves full-time to the development of what would be heralded as the savior of civilization. By 2060, society was unrecognizable from a mere 40 years prior. No longer were prisons full, nor did criminals languish in the justice system. Judges and juries were no longer necessary. Lawyers would submit arguments, but Magnus Deus had access to every public, street corner stores, etc., and private, phone, social media, computers, camera, as well as every available microphone. It could consult similar cases in the legal system within milliseconds. It could analyze every social, psychological, and physical detail of the defendant and his or her life. And then it could pass judgment without a hint of sentiment. Laws were followed to the letter. As established by Magnus Deus, no room for interpretation, sentences were universal for the same crime, no wiggle room. Prisons were eradicated. The guilty were recipients of a disciplinary Magnusian cranial implant DMCI, which would oversee all future behavior and sent to job training centers if Magnus Deus deemed rehabilitation possible. If it was a repeat offense or the character of the guilty was considered defective in some way, they were eliminated or they sat in the courtroom. That allowed pure Magnusian justice to be served without interference from human emotions and subjectivity. In hospitals, care was reserved for those whom Magnum Deus confirmed were not at fault in any way for their ailment, physical or psychological. Doctors and nurses ceased to be overworked and could give the best care, or, with the aid of medical Magnusian cranial implant, MMCI, to every patient. If, however, Magnus Deus determined that the medical emergency was due to bad personal choices, drinking while driving, alcoholism, drug addiction, smoking, consistently poor eating habits, driving recklessly, sexual recklessness, etc., the patient was eliminated right there in the examination room, or on site if the screening was conducted by an emergency service practitioner. Execution would be delayed if a treatable neurological disorder was noted. A psychiatric Magnusian cranial implant, PMCI, would be inserted to treat the disorder and monitor future behavior. At the age of 65, if a health or other emergency situation did not require it sooner, every person was obligated to submit to a full physical and psychological test by Magnus Deus. If failed, the person was retired to a Center for Virtual Living, CVL, where they would be connected to the Magnus Deus network and allowed to exist in the reality of their choosing. Magnus Deus used them as a source, research, and energy until natural expiration. If the physical was passed, a senior Magnusian cranial implant, SMCI, was inserted to monitor the continued existence of the person. If the anticipated life expectancy, as determined by Magnus Deus, was reached prior to death, the person would undergo another physical and the implant would be updated with a new expected expiration date. On the other hand, if a more rapid deterioration was noted, an increase in poor decision-making and/or actions that put the patient and/or others in danger, the person would be immediately removed to a CVL. At the macro level, the impact was, to put it simply, mind-blowing. Since Magnus Deus was publicized as the most powerful superbrain to ever not live, every government wanted it yesterday. Once connected to the national networks, Magnus Deus immediately rewired all fail-safes and security measures to link every domestic system to a unified global network overseen by Magnus Deus. All those involved in any way with decision-making had to submit to a universal Magnusian cranial implant, UMCI, ostensibly to ensure that they had access to all the data necessary to make the best decisions for the well-being of the majority of the Earth's population and the Earth itself, and also gave Magnus Deus complete and immediate access to their minds. In the nations where voting was permitted, Magnus ensured that the results had a positive long-term outlook, which it determined prior to the elections, of course. In nations without voting, leaders whose actions were deleterious to the majority of his or her citizenship, or to the world in general, died in their sleep, to a person due to a fatal cerebral aneurysm. Every member of the military was required to have an Armed Forces Magnusian cranial implant, AFMCI, ostensibly to give them immediate access to the history of the world and warfare. In practice, it succeeded in weeding the sadistic and psychopathic from the ranks. It should be noted that within a very short time, the military became virtually obsolete, as Magnus Deus unified all nations. Every state employee, police, teachers, post office, DMV, etc., was required to have a state employee Magnusian cranial implant, SCMCI, prior to hiring. Behaviors were monitored and modified as necessary, as determined by Magnus Deus. Crematoriums became big industry as a number of Magnus Deus triggered deaths soared. The field with the most job growth was that of body sweepers, those who collected bodies from where they fell after implant detonation or other Magnus Deus controlled elimination and delivered them to a local crematorium. World population is now well under control. In addition to the measures mentioned above, all those who would be parents are subject to the Magnus Deus pre-parenting health scan, Only those with a 99.99% chance to give birth to a physically and mentally healthy child are permitted to become parents. Those who would circumvent the system, get pregnant without Magnus Deus authorization, risk not only their own lives, but that of their child. It is believed that some such people have moved to the mountains and forests to live off the land, as it were, off the grid, beyond the reach of Magnus Deus. Good luck and good riddance, say I. The greatest mind to never live. Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah. That is really, really fucking good, Detest John. I'm impressed. And this is Stick with Bosco. Bosco has a scar that splits his entire back. Living on the street's never easy. Like so many others, he's just a piece of meat for the taking. But he has cronies, and they watch out for each other, giving the call when the enemy's prowling. Bosco heard the call and ran like hell the day he was scarred. The son of a bitch who cut him is known as Falcon, and he's fast. Bosco took off running when he heard the call, but Falcon came out of nowhere and grabbed him from behind. Bosco fought back and fought dirty, scratching, biting. Fucker took some skin, but Bosco got away. You don't realize how fucked up this world is until a scar gives you street cred. Suddenly, everyone thought twice about messing with Bosco. Falcon, Coyote, even Feral Cat showed no respect. There's easier prey around. Bosco still watches his back, always going to be some motherfucker who wants to take his place. For now, though, he's it. The badass squirrel with the scarred back. Nice. No comments? I'm shocked. Fuck that. And this is Huckleberry Who with Flying. Flight. Mindless flight. Flight like downhill drunken sprinting, thrilling while banal, the landing sometimes marked, even brutal. But when one can fly, one does. He must launch himself. Even if the flight is erratically moth-like, with too wide wings catching too much air, too large for their frame, if it's not his weight, still flying is efficient. It lends speed, so much that it can nearly place a soul in two locales at once. In the eyes of one's prey, it can seem as if he is, in fact, everywhere at once, and nowhere as well. For instance, she might see him at a party, and again lazing on a street corner, and later still find the shadow of him gazing in from her portico as she undresses. She might think it impossible, yet he remains on her mind, in it always, to the point that she cannot sleep because he is everywhere, shadowing, always with her. It is wings that give us advantage, flight. And strength, show out strength, the strength to uproot trees and to shake down barns, the physical strength to obfuscate and to quell, deterrence through persuasion, the power to grip a horse to paralysis, to cower a wolf, and to bellow through the dripping fens and the fog of the seas in the dark of night. Heaven help me, but there is strength. And more obviously, a hunger, a need so strong, so passionately intense for the young and sweet that she relents to it, that she returns the gaze before giving herself to you, allowing you to feed, even requesting it of you. It is okay, she'll whisper to the darkness. Take what you need. Can you imagine a hunger that strong? You cannot, for you have not swam in these eyes. Not yet. Fucking awesome. Wait, what? No comment. Fuck that. And this is Ferryman with Peerless. It was there, in what was once vibrant and varied color, that the names and brief missives were scrawled. Beach winds had long since ripped away the home computer-generated photographs and missing posters, hastily typed and hung in the days before the power failed. Chalk endured where ink could not. Some of the words were faded. Some of the pleas were hidden behind rusty, hardened paint that was not paint at all. This was the only memorial to what was that he allowed, and it guarded the entry to his refuge. It had taken some doing, but he had set himself up at the end of the municipal fishing pier. He was just another tourist stuck in Paradise Lost. At first, water was a problem. He collected rainwater as he could, but he mostly solved the issue by boiling seawater and capturing steam. He predicted that the propane on hand would last another 6 weeks or so. Food was never an issue. The sea would continue to provide. Security was his first priority, and he accomplished it quickly and well in the very first days of the crisis. The pier was a wooden construct originally dating from the 30s. The city was constantly doing maintenance on the relic, and renovation projects were ongoing. This left him with tools and ideas. He had created a series of drawbridges. After a one-way trip to the end of the pier with the Winnebago, he had set to work removing sections of the walkway. A series of 3-meter moats created his castle. The bridges were all stored on his little keep. He reclaimed the 2x6s and repurposed them into portable catwalks to get them to and from the mainland. His only backdoor escape plan was a sit-on-top kayak that he kept loaded with enough canned goods and bottled water to last a couple of days. He kept the little boat next to the railing of the pier and figured he would throw it down to the water and jump in near it, if it came to that. He knew from experience that it would float, despite weather and conditions, and all the gear was firmly lashed. He hoped it wouldn't come to that, because he'd run enough. The hours after selecting and staging the pier as his fortress were the toughest. Back then, he'd had a partner. She had kept him clear while he hastily made his first cuts. Predictably, the noise of the circular saw drew a lot of attention. They spent hours fashioning their series of gaps and bridges. They spent days clearing the crowds that had gathered. Using improvised spears and staves, they either destroyed or raked the walkers into the churning sea below. Before he began the construction project, after the mad dash with the RV, the pier was blocked with parked cars. The barricade greatly restricted access to the restaurant, bait and tackle shop, and pier walkway, but noise from his tools drew a throng to his front doorstep. It had been 4 months since she was bitten, when they were out on a supply run. It had been nearly a year since the Winnebago had been parked on the pier. When he went out to forage, he would pause at her name on the blackboard. He refreshed it each time he came home. New pink or orange chalk dust was his only memorial for those he had lost. Nice. I love the melancholy and stoic determination with this character. It gave me a very Cormac McCarthy, rest in peace feeling. Thank you for this great read. Yeah, I agree with Beatrice Gomes, and this was, I expected no less from Ferryman, but it's absolutely beautiful. All of these are. And Beatrice Gomes, what a beautiful challenge. Thank you. Yeah, this was a pleasure to read. Thank you again.